And we are live. All right. So, as I was mentioning, I just kind of want to give some brief advanced stuff up for a little bit. Some of us, again, you may not get to this part, you may not. It's not exactly required or anything like that. But as I was explaining just now, as you know, the rendered view is great. You know, there's a lot of potential. And by default, you'll notice that all of your stuff is kind of this white, you know, really pristine kind of look, if you will. There's no real texture. It's not really a plastic. It's not a metal, glass. Can't see through it. And to be fair, I mean, in architecture, we use all kinds of stuff, whether they be opaque or transparent, or like I was saying, maybe it's even colorized, and we colorize stuff like this in Photoshop real quick, where maybe I'm trying to show certain datums or I want to show that the grid element is actually steel-like and kind of shiny or reflective like aluminum or something. Very often we even start to put these in actual places, and we'll get to that too. So this is kind of maybe the first part of making these look a little bit more realistic. But what I would say is why do that in Photoshop, or why add a whole nother program if I don't have to, right? You guys know how pressed we are for time in studio, right? The same thing, to be absolutely honest, in the real world as well, where they're expecting, hey, I quoted that I was going to do this job in 5 hours, and I'm not going to make any money if I do it in 10. Does that make sense? All right, I mean, don't get me wrong, my boss, he's going to have to pay me no matter what, and that boss usually is charging $50 an hour and paying me 20, right? So don't get me wrong, even if it did take me twice as long, my boss still made $10 an hour off me, but maybe not the $30 an hour that he was going for or she was going for. So one thing that we can do, and one thing I wanted to introduce, was obviously the materials option. And it could be done by the entire layer itself, or it could be done incrementally one at a time. But what is kind of nice about that is I can select, say, like, you know, even everything that I want to turn into that. So for instance, if I layered my stuff correctly, I should be able to turn some things off. It looks like I had everything on default. That's okay. Or everything was in vertical color, I guess. Dang, what are the other in my grid? So I'll switch to my vertical and turn that off. So when you do really just need one thing, guys, I swear, layering your stuff is like, thank you, past self, for being so organized, because I just wanted to select all those, and it's a lot simpler. But let's say I wanted to turn those into some sort of steel or aluminum, or at least give them maybe a fresh polish look to maybe even get more details on what this is going to look like. I would essentially go to my properties, which looks like a color wheel. From there, you'll see that there's another option. It looks like a little paint tube. It's not exactly in the same spot. On Windows, sometimes it's still kind of in the toolbar. The great thing about Rhino against these programs, they use the same picture for each icon, so that's kind of nice. But it does look like a little paint tube, and if you highlight over it, it does say material. So we'll click on that, and by default, it'll look something like this. Use material layer, and that's just that white, palish default layer. It's always going to come up for every layer that you have. However, when you click on this, you'll see there's 3 more options, such as, again, that default material. You can use an object parent, so like you can say, like, if you uploaded something, very often, like, I don't know, if you get like a stone texture you download from the internet, it actually comes in like a 3D model, and you upload that 3D model, and you basically just copy the model, right? Which is what that option is trying to tell you. And then what I use mostly is actually this plus sign. So you'll notice if you hit the plus sign, there's already built-in scenarios. To be fair, I don't really like those very often because they are kind of limited. However, if you're just beginning and you don't know what respective specular highlight is, then yeah, maybe you should start small with just glass, right, before you try and make glass yourself, which is essentially what I'm going to go over today. But let's say I did want to go the simple route and I wanted to go with something metal, right? Okay, well, there is a metal option. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And as you can see, there's not a lot of options in that metal, which is why I don't always use these presets. But to be fair, they are quick, and you know, if I wanted something slightly grayish, absolutely. And then, as you can see, I can't really change much else, right? Really just the amount of color. I can do a bitmap texture, so for instance, basically that means like a small little texture. That really just adds time to our render. I really wouldn't use that unless I was doing like an interior, and I was even gonna see some sort of bump material. But often the relief is called bump or relief to some sort of material. You've seen it actually before if you've ever watched like Toy Story 4 and they get really close to like Notice the couch cushions, right? Notice all the other objects. They really look like the material it is, but they didn't model all that crap, right? They just simply actually used a bitmap image. And we may get that a tutorial of that when we get into Photoshop a little bit. It's extremely advanced, and to be fair, honestly, once you get this stage, that stuff will come kind of naturally. I don't want to scare you away from how advanced a computer and how difficult it can really be. But that being the case, we have some metal, and as you can see, it's a little bit different, right? A little bit more shiny, hardly different, if you ask me, right? So I'm going to try that again. And instead of using metal, I'm going to add a new one. And I'm going to say, honestly, there's even more types. So if you type into more types, there's even more that you can upload and select. However, I think the best way is to maybe just learn what it's doing. So I'll choose a custom. And as you can see, there's a lot more options here, such as the color of it, the transparency, the reflectivity, the gloss remain. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, you gotta have to start getting familiar with some of these terms, and what's great is they match reality, right? We have specular highlight in reality. If you've ever watched an anime cartoon, it's the sparkle in their eyes, right? The reflection off of that surface. And you start to really understand the science of what's happening materially. Let's make that a little bigger. Sweet. So one thing we could do, like let's say I was trying to go for that metal still, and I wanted to make sure that somebody read it as metal, I'd maybe select something a little bit darker, right? I mean really dark here, to get kind of a base color. And what kind of stinks is you always get the yellow selection color. But I'm going to actually add more reflectivity and bring back maybe some of that lightness or that metallic look that would be in metal. And that's looking a little bit better, right? At least in terms of, especially once I get all my pieces back. We start to see maybe a slight difference. I mean, I barely see it, and to be fair, it probably isn't even that noticeable in the piece. But what's nice is we can actually change the material itself as well. So once you change that custom material, it'll change it to all of them. So it was really important that I kind of applied it to all of them first, no matter what I wanted to apply it to. But then, you know, if I do actually want to make those changes, it'll actually change all of them. Does that make sense, guys? So again, don't try and like do this one at a time. Like if you know all of this is going to be one thing, go ahead and select it all, because you're kind of setting up a map, if you will, that ties into that object that you originally selected. Hopefully that makes some sense. Because I see students struggle like, man, I got this one perfect. How do I apply it to all of them? And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to select each one and basically put that material on it, which is essentially what we did. So that's looking pretty good. You know, maybe I want this to also be the same, and that's what I mean. Like I'd have to take this extrusion, choose the layer, and choose that custom metal that I selected, right? So it's already gonna save it for you and look pretty sweet. However, maybe I'm going for something a little bit more diagrammatic, right? And maybe I want some sort of plastic color or who knows, right? So again, I'm gonna refine my layers and get the piece that I actually wanna look at. So maybe take off my grids. And this is why you should organize your stuff like I did not. For you, it'll be no problem. You'll simply turn off things and turn them back on. In my case, I will have to select them one at a time. But let's say I wanted this to, I don't know, be like Villa, what is it? Parc de la Villette in Paris, France, where there's a red color, a red metal plastic color that's really shiny and reflective. And maybe I want to get that point across to my studio professor, right, that I'm going for this folly nature and quite inspired Bernard Tschumi, right? So in my case, I'm going to go back to material. I'm going to select a new material. Again, just make another one. I'm going to go with, plastic is actually pretty good too. I use that one all the time because there's some more options in that plastic. But let's say I'm going to go for that red base color. Where are you going, Leo? Oh, okay. See better? I was like, don't leave. But yeah, you'll see also, when I've exploded an object, guys, you'll see that it didn't quite get all the pieces or layers too. So be careful of that, right? If you accidentally blow up your stuff, you're going to have to tell each object to be a certain color, in our case. So let's switch that again, go back to custom. That's looking a little bright, if you ask me, so I'm gonna give it some reflectivity. Going for kind of a red metal. If I wanted it to be glass, I could. I can make it transparent. And I can add a bunch of what is at least acronymed as IDR, which is basically internal deflective reflections. Again, not trying to get super scientific here, but you'll notice when you increase something like this, it actually increases the refractive rate that's inside of it. So like, I don't know if you had like a 2, I usually for glass is technically 1.52 refractive index. Again, I'm not trying to scare anybody away, but if you wanted it to actually be true glass, you can look up on, I mean, look at that, look at those shiny reflections. I mean, it's really getting the point across, right? And now that metal's really starting to look like metal, right? You'll notice that at certain angles, it does different things though, right? Obviously from the top angle, we're not getting so much of those reflections, whereas the bottom seems to be really getting those reflections. And why? Why is that, guys? Anybody take a guess? It's because of the lights that I have, such as the sun or maybe even a spotlight. And in this case, what's nice and also not nice is that you'll notice I have some lights in my background and it's reflecting those exact lights. And it's very material based, right? By default, they're set to like 0 so that it reflects nothing and you don't really see anything. But you'll notice as soon as you put something, it really starts to interact with the environment. When I move around, you see that light kind of moves around the metal. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is cool for me because I was born in 1990 and I've come a long way, right? For some of us, we're like, so what? I see that all the time. It's maybe oversaturated. But what is nice is maybe having the intense ability to control it. So in my case, if I go back to, say, my render settings, and I didn't maybe like how shiny that was, I could still change the studio lighting, if you will. So like no environment. And you'll notice I can change the actual environment and then also the one that is actually interacting with others. So right there, that one was controlling the material, whereas another one was actually controlling the background. Now, you couldn't really notice the difference when we were talking about rendering in the beginning, right? I mean, it didn't matter what you did to those because it wasn't going to interact with anything. Well, now it definitely becomes important. And I would say, yeah, test some things out because, I don't know, maybe I want to reflect in my windows San Pedro Springs Park right across the street. What would I do? I'd take a picture of it in Google Earth and I'd make sure to put it into my environment so that the reflection came off of those objects. So let me show you what I mean. In my case, let's pick an environment. So import one maybe, and something that has something in it, such as like, I don't know, the Sinking Gardens. It's gonna have more like an image in there. Wait for it. What was nice is you're seeing it's kind of reflecting something else. Do you guys see that? There's like trees in there. How freaking cool is that? I had to Photoshop that shit back in the day, you know what I mean? So to think that you can do that by simply changing the environment of a button is pretty phenomenal to me, right? And saves me hours of time in Photoshop, right? To just basically change that environment. If I wanted it to match maybe the other exterior environment, I, again, go to Senkin, right? Oh. Right, and now it's gonna, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's gigantic, and I'd really want to change the focal length of my camera, right, because the background's so big. But it's actually because that image is so small. It should be an actual 360 image. It's probably not, actually. Not. If you look at it, I mean, doesn't look like a real 360 image. But again, what's nice is I don't necessarily have to have it for the background. I can choose Studio E instead, and we can still get those internal reflections, right? By all means, I might be taking this and putting it in Photoshop anyway and using my own background. I mean, no time to waste, right? So in any time that I can save some time, I try to implore it or practice it, right, to say the least. Transparency is looking a little weird there now, so let's switch that back. And again, it's a little bit easier. I don't necessarily have to select every object anymore. If I already kind of have my materials kind of set, if you will, I can go to those materials. So in my case, really just select on one object so you can kind of get it back. And basically change that custom layer. Obviously, once I change it, it changes, right? If I did want to maybe made a mistake and I was like, oh man, I actually want that to be blue, I would need to make another layer, right? So in my case, let's say I did want it to be blue for some reason. Let's go ahead and let's try plastic. Plastic does have some more options, right? And it doesn't always look like plastic, I will say. Maybe like a blue. And take down some of the reflectivity, right? And I can still do those things. So I mean, don't get me wrong, what's really nice is it's rendering in real time. And let me tell you, that really does have a shiny feel to it now. I mean, that definitely gets the point across, right? Not too shabby. Anyway, I just wanted to break it down a little bit more in terms of how you can materialize these things. Now, don't get me wrong, as soon as I give this to students, they're like, everything must be colored, right? Be careful, right? Because there's definitely a way to overdo color or materiality, right? Half of the battle is actually understanding when I should use some of these technologies to show my professor, right? If I'm in the first stages of design, they are not going to want to see this. They're going to be like, whoa, why are you working with the metal material? We haven't even talked about material, right? How many of you guys like, well, never mind, it's kind of a random question. But what I'm trying to say is often in studio is the materiality comes at the end, right? So it's after the modeling, it's after the space, it's after understanding some of these things. However, I can't imagine, there's been plenty of instances where I'm trying to understand like a reflective pool in front of my building. I'm trying to understand 100 away from feet, will I see a reflection in the building? How far do I need to make the pool? How big do I need to make it? And stuff like this is really awesome because I can just change the water to water reflectivity, even give it some waves a little bit and see, oh yeah, my plan is gonna work, right? So don't get me wrong, we can use this to even test, in a way, pseudo kind of reality relationships as well. What does that metal look like? What if my building is completely black? And to be fair, this is a lot quicker, if you will, than doing that in Photoshop, by the way, right? And can you imagine if you had to Photoshop each of these one at a time? You had to get the red in there. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's exactly how we used to do it. But now we just worry about the background. Yep. Stick a layer in, got a background, looks materialized. Blur it up a little bit, and we'll definitely get to that, right? But just for some of us, just in case you're kind of already ahead, you've already got 2 models built and everything like that, I did want to do this small demonstration that we can start giving it some flair, some spices, as I call them. So, any questions on that? Maybe you want to see maybe a question about material, something popped up in your head? How do I show sand, things like that? Not yet? Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that for today in terms of demonstration. But yeah, refer to this one to, start making it look real, more or less. Anyway, but yeah, I think you could see also it could be used as a diagram too, right? To really emphasize certain points or certain objects in that complexity, right? Maybe it has a heart and it's red and you want them to focus on that unique spatial situation to where the red is going to start to grab their attention and focus on that element. Maybe it's your entire concept of your project and it happens to be related to the Chinese flag and the honor in the family and the luck that comes from the color red, right, or something. What I'm trying to say is we can use it to communicate effectively. So I'll leave it at that for today.